tarot cards are often the first step and basis for a seeker of metaphysical knowledge, like you, to discover your forever path. That could be astrology, numerology, healing arts, or any other spiritual interest you discover along the way. Elaine Ireland is not only a teacher of tarot, she is a mentor who supports you and will be there for you. Visit www.elaineIrelandtarotmaster.com now and discover how Elaine's mentoring, tarot card and psychic readings, tarot card classes, and more help you to grow into the true being you are meant to be. Welcome to Conversations with the Ancients, where you're about to discover a whole different world than the one that, up until now, you've believed you're familiar with. World-Renowned Metaphysicist, practicing psychic and tarot teacher Elaine Ireland invites you on a journey where you'll hear voices from the past, interviews with some of the greatest metaphysicians you've never heard of, because in their time, they needed to move with stealth. You'll also meet today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who will show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Be sure you visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, hear the words of metaphysicians who blazed the trail. You're not in jail, thanks to them.
This is Elaine Ireland with Conversation with the Ancients, and I happen to have an ancient with me. Karen, I've known Karen Marie a long time, 30 plus years, so I can get by with that. We estimate 37, right? Estimate 37 years?
Yeah.
Karen Marie is, in all seriousness, a long time working psychic professional. She has a long list of things that she does with great expertise, and I'm going to give you just a few. She'll introduce the others to you. She is a professional psychic, of course, and a darn good one, too. Spell that the other way, the more dramatic way. Astrologer, and a really good one. Past life progressionist, which she's going to explain that. That's an interesting additional word to past life. Empath, yes, which is not always the nicest, easiest thing to be. And a medium. And then the other one I like is rebirthing. She also does clearings. And what's the rest of your list?
Psychic development for those that want to develop their own abilities. I work with them in doing that.
Speaking of that, what's the number one question you get about how you do, why you do?
How did you get into this? Is basically how did you get started as a psychic? Did you know you were a psychic when you were growing up? And the answer was, I did not know I was psychic. I had deja vu experiences all the time as a kid, like feeling like, oh, I've done this before, I've heard this before, or knowing what someone was going to say right before they would say it. I had a couple dreams that were vivid and came true when I was like around age 12. And that was like, whoa. But I didn't know till I was older that I was an empath, because I just assumed everyone walked into a room and knew what everybody was feeling. And then it wasn't until I started developing psychic abilities, I'm like, oh, that's not a thing. You know, just like you can see what they're wearing, you know what they're feeling, that everybody doesn't do that. I'm like, oh, okay. And it explains so much after I found out I was an empath, because I was soaking up everybody's negative feelings and didn't know why I felt so crappy so often. But my mother went to a psychic here in Austin when she went to University of Texas when she was a student, Madam Hipple. I don't know if you remember Madam Hipple. It had been here forever.
Oh, Miss Hipple.
Oh, this told my mom that she would meet a man named Bob in a uniform and see the world. And so she did indeed meet my dad. My mom was from Killeen. My dad was in the Army, stationed at Fort Hood. So he was indeed in a military uniform. His name was Robert. He went by Bob. We moved over to Germany. I mean, that's where I was born, in Germany. So that was my mom's favorite party story. Like I heard her tell it over and over and over again, how a psychic. So I didn't really grow up with anyone psychic around me. I just heard that story over and over, which was a positive take on a psychic. So I had a positive, oh, okay, psychics can be really, really accurate. That's really cool. And then when I came to UT in 1981, I went to go see Madame Hipple, and she was like older than dirt at that point. And I don't remember much of what she told me, other than she told me I was very psychic myself and to be careful on motorcycles. And I did have a moped accident when I was in college. And then I went to a palm reader who told me I had a mystic cross And then I would make my living doing psychic readings. And I was 19 at the time and a business major at UT. And I thought she was full of it. Like, I walked out of there going, yeah, right, whatever. Didn't believe it. Yeah, no. And then I sat down in front of another psychic, Cheryl Sterrett, who had come down from Dallas, and they were doing a little mini fair on the UT campus. I just happened upon it. And she started channeling from my father, who had passed away of a suicide when I was 15. And I'm a young college student. There's no way she would have known that my dad, the message, I was just in tears. And I felt in a 20-minute reading, she had gotten to the same place of like knowing me that it usually took me 6 months of therapy to get to. So I was like, wow, okay, this is so cool. And it really, and then I remember going to a little psychic fair and sitting down in front of 3 different psychics, all of which went on and on and on about how psychic I was. And so then it was like, oh, okay, if I'm so psychic that all the psychics are talking about it and a palm reader told me to make my living doing it, then I should be able to access that and develop it, and I would try to see auras and spirit guides and have zero luck at that and was super frustrated. I went out and got a deck of tarot cards and started playing around with them, I wasn't getting anything off the cards. And one day I was living in an apartment and my neighbors on either side of me, one was a guy, one was a girl, were over and were visiting with me. And one of them looked over and saw my deck of tarot cards sitting on my kitchen table. Now, this is the mid 80s. This is not like now where almost everybody owns their own decks of tarot cards. So we brought up the conversation about, oh, do you do readings? I'm like, well, I'm supposedly psychic, but I'm not getting anything out of these cards. And my neighbor said, well, maybe you don't have the right deck. I've got several. Would you like to look at mine? And my other neighbor goes, yeah, I've got 4. I'm like, what are we at? I'm living between a neighbor who has 3 decks and one that has 4 decks. So they both went and got their decks and we all were exploring all of them. And one of those decks really jumped out at me. It was the Aleister Crowley Thoth deck. At the time, it was a non-traditional tarot deck. But it really spoke to me that I'm very artistic, creative. So the images really woke me up. And there was something about the old traditional images on a traditional Rider-Waite deck that always stirred up something for me. And it's probably connected to a past life I've had with the cards. But this was like looking at a painting where I could just like interpret it myself. So I started playing around with that deck and just grabbing my friends, doing readings for them, just playing with different layouts and not really feeling like it was taking really. Say I'd put out 12 cards and maybe I'd get hits on 3 of them. And I would just kind of go on what I was getting and not worry so much on what I wasn't. Again, I'm just playing around with it. There's no goal except to develop my own abilities, right? One day a friend brought a friend over and I didn't know her at all. And she said, I brought my friend over to get a reading from you. And I'm like, okay. And so, I sat her down and I was sitting there doing the cards. And all of a sudden I felt this rush of energy just coming in through the top of my head. It was pouring. As I talk about it, I'm feeling it again, like just electric energy, like running down my arms, on my face. I started feeling goosies everywhere. And then I just knew this woman had been sexually assaulted by her father. And my logical, rational mind was like, I'm not effing saying that to this woman. Like, this is supposed to be for fun. And I didn't know where the energy was coming from. I wasn't hearing it. I didn't see anybody. But again, this energy just flowing through me and this sense of knowing with this woman. And so she was looking at me going, what are you getting? And I apologized to her before I said anything. And then I told her what I was getting and her eyes just got huge and she started crying. And she said, how did you know that? I've never told anyone that. And then my goosies got goosies. I just had this like confirmation, like, okay, it's just, so then I realized, okay, this is channeling. I had heard the term, but I didn't know what that meant. And I'm like, okay, this information is coming through me, not from me. It's not coming from my brain or my mind.
Yeah.
And then I would just start using the phrase, I'm a clear and open channel, right? And I went to a neighbor's party. This is the turning point for me. I went to one of my neighbors' parties. They were having a party. One of their friends came up to me and said, "Oh, I heard you do psychic readings. Would you do one for me?" And I'm like, "Sure, let me go get my deck." So I went next door, got my deck, sat down, and people just lined up. And I was doing like 15, 20-minute readings for people back to back to back. And people were going, "Oh my God, how'd you know?" Like they were just all like, was hitting everybody right on. I was just feeling like electricity myself. I knew I was on, and wasn't thinking about it. I was just saying what I was getting with people. And I did that back to back to back readings for like 4 hours. And when I got up from that event, I'm like, that is the last time I'm doing this for free. That people are lining up for hours and is it my turn? Is it my turn? Kind of thing. Then so that's when I decided to try out for the Central Texas Parapsychology Association. You had to do readings for a couple psychics in order to be part of a member of that group, and they put on psychic fairs and readings at the New Age bookstore. And then you and I ended up at the same psychic fair, a little psychic fair inside of a bar, inside of a hotel. And that's where I started, just doing reading. I remember the first psychic fair I did for CTPA. I did like 52 readings in those first 2 days, and like was super high, couldn't sleep when I came home, and then crashed out for 3 days. So, and that was, like I said, 37 years ago. That's when I started with the readings.
A lot's happened with you in 37 years.
Yes, it has. I only had one baby when I started doing readings, and now I have 6 grown children. So,
and how many grandchildren?
2. 2 grands and 6 grown. Yeah. Yeah. And, I utilized my intuition. I homeschooled all 6 of my kids, and I used my intuition with them as well. Like, I feel like everyone is psychic. That's my thing, is that everyone has intuitive abilities, just like everyone learn a musical instrument or learn to sing or beat a drum at the very least, and some people can't really carry a tune. And then some people sound fabulous. And some people, their psychic abilities are just wide open and it's easy and accessible and they can't really shut it down. And other people have to work a little bit more at it. I think like an instrument, when you practice staying open, then, you get better at it. And I remember one time early on in my readings, I was living with a boyfriend and we'd gotten into a big fight like the night before I was supposed to do this 2-day psychic fair. And I thought, there's no way. I've got my stuff's all up and I can't see clear. And I was chanting. I've been a practicing Buddhist for 40 years. That morning going, do I call in sick? Like I've already paid for the table or space or whatever. Like, what do I do? And I got the guidance from my guides that I needed to just slide my mind to the side, slide my emotional body to the side, and just show up and channel for others, like park my stuff, right? Because I was like busy, well, he's in, and I should have that, like that kind of, I was still fighting within my head from the previous fight. But I did that. I went, I'm just going to slide my stuff to the side. And then it was electric again. It was like, oh, and then just that exercise of when I'm caught up in my mind or caught up in my emotional body to remind myself, oh, I can slide this stuff and breathe and connect with my higher self at any point. If I'm in the grocery store, if I'm in the traffic, like whatever, using my intuition. And it shows up differently for everyone, right? Some people are visual. They can see auras. They can see spirit guides, right? I still haven't seen. I can feel I'm a feeler, so I can feel what people are feeling. I can feel the energy off of people. I channel. I'm a medium. People's loved ones will interrupt and come through in readings. And, like I remember once when my oldest daughter was 10, I'd been doing psychic readings for almost 10 years or so, little 9. And I brought home an aura photograph. Do you remember the Curlian photographers that used to show up at psychic fairs? You put your metal plates and they would take a Polaroid of what your aura supposedly looks like. So I had traded with one of those at a psychic fair and had brought photograph home and came and tossed it on the table. And my oldest daughter comes and picks up the picture and she looks at the picture. She looks at me. She looks at the picture. She looks at me and she tosses it back down on the table. She's like, you have way more blue in your aura than this photo. And I'm like, wait, hold it. Do you see auras? She's like, yes, don't you? And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm like, so, just like all the senses, psychic abilities can show up in all those senses, in those
all the clairs, clair audio, clair sensient, clair. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And to me, the intuition is the voice of the higher self. Call that your Buddha nature. That's what I call it as a Buddhist. Call it your Christ self, your higher self, your divine self. It's the part of your soul that you take with you after your body is put down. And it's the voice of wisdom within. The intuition will whisper to you and like, wouldn't you love to? Oh, wouldn't it be great if? Oh, it's fabulous when. Whereas the mind will go, you need to, you should. It's a harsher, more rigid, for me anyway. The mind voice is more harsh, more like critical parent voice, whereas the intuition is more loving and, gently guiding. Although I have had like, whoa, hold up, when there's been something like I need to stop immediately. That happened once when I was driving through a green light and I got this hold up and I put on the brakes just to miss a bicyclist that was dodging across the lane. I would have T-boned him. It would have been his fault, but still, because my intuition gave me a shout out, I averted that. So that's just intuition showing up in daily life, which I feel like we could all benefit from listening to ourselves. And I talk to people all the time about, you often know when your intuition is talking to you after the fact. When you say, I knew I should have done that. I knew I shouldn't have done, like, I got like, okay, what was that you overrode? It happens a lot in relationships. People will override their intuitions with what they get early in a relationship. Oh no, that'll be okay. Like, no.
No, that's a red flag. Sometimes it is okay. We're supposed to do a different look at something. And as long as we do the look, that's why we got the red flag. Yeah. And if it is something that we can help with, support with, offer something, take a load off, then okay, we've done what we need to do.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
Yeah. And the number one thing I think I tell other clients too is that you only need to get your guidance one moment at a time, one day at a time. You don't have to figure out the whole big picture. I mean, I didn't set out to be a psychic. My journey unfolded into where that's what happened. And even with my past life regressions that I facilitate, someone else regressed me early on when I was exploring abilities and such. And ever since then, I've been able to see past lives and access that information, almost like a childhood memory that you hadn't thought about in decades will just pop up sometimes. Something will trigger a memory. It felt very similar to that. I would just all of a sudden get past life information about myself is where it started. And then I started grabbing my friends as guinea pigs and let me see if I can regress you. Just using my own intuition and some of the ways that person had regressed me. And sure enough, from the very first time I tried it, I was successful at guiding my friend, my first little guinea pig, back into several different lifetimes. And so I just started adding that to my bag of tricks and doing that. And that is so much fun to guide someone else back, because it's one thing, I get hits on readings, past life information in readings all the time, whether it's I'm throwing the cards or I'm doing the astrology. And usually when I do a session with someone, I start with their astrology. I'll look at their birth chart, including lots of asteroids, which is where a lot of the divine feminine energy shows up in the chart. Otherwise, you just have the moon and Venus for feminine energies in the traditional planets. You start adding the asteroids, you get a lot more variety of the divine feminine showing up. But just, you can see in a chart sometimes past life stuff going on, particularly certain, like the South Node, for example. There's other things, and sometimes stuff will just pop out to me about past lives. I'll just get a hit, or I'm throwing the cards and I get a hit about a past life. Again, sometimes that information is just coming through. But a past life regression, I'm guiding the client back and coaching them through telling me what they're seeing. And it's a lot more powerful because then they're experiencing the memories. And, people typically go from 2 to 8 lifetimes in one regression, just depending.
You just kind of fluxed over astrology.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that you are best known for, is your astrology work.
And it didn't start out like that, because I read Linda Goodman's Sun Signs when I was 10. So I would always be asking people what their sign was. And then when I started kind of trying to investigate astrology back when I was working on developing my abilities, I was encountering trines and sextiles and squares and like oppositions and like, I mean, wait a minute, there's way too much math here. Like,
That's why I never got involved. I'm not a mathy.
And then after I'd been doing readings about 10 years, I would always get the client's sun sign. I would want to know that as sort of a tune-in point. But then I just thought, I thought, you know what, if I just learn a little bit along the way. And one of the things as a homeschool mom, that I homeschooled all 6 of my children, and I was an unschooler on top of that, which is basically using my own intuition and trusting my child's intuition and building that, because 6 kids and they're all different from each other. They all have different suns, different moons, and different risings. So I had a great little palette of samples to look at in terms of astrology. But learning, like, for example, the rising sign, which you do not know if you don't know the time of your birth. You need to know the time and place of your birth to get your rising sign. That is just as important as the sun sign. In fact, the rising sign is what creates the timing of events. It's what puts all the planets in the houses in a chart, right? So I started with learning about sun, moon, and rising, then learning about all the different planets. I had already kind of learned what the sun signs meant in the various signs. So I just sort of transferred what I knew about sun signs into, okay, this planet is in your 3rd house. It's ruled by Sagittarius, blah, blah, blah. I had to learn what each of the houses meant. In fact, I still have somewhere a poster that I made where I just drew the pie of the 12 houses. And as I would read about a house, or if I learn about something, I would like write little notes. So I've got like, what all the first house means, what all the second house. And so I learned that. And then after I had really gotten down, then I used to just look at an ephemeris, which just shows the day. It's not involving the rising sign, but it'll show where the planets are on the day you were born and what signs all the planets were in it. I found that I could start channeling just with that information. Like the moon can change in a day. It could be in Taurus in the morning and in Gemini in the afternoon. So depending, you wouldn't always know someone's moon, but that I started doing that. And then, after I started doing charts and birth charts and realizing that when I got beyond the knowledge of the signs, then I was channeling with it. Like stuff was starting to come together in like the 5D realm that I was picking up on. And then in recent years, I started studying the transits, where the planets are right now and how those are affecting. And that was a whole nother layer. I mean, I'll be going down rabbit holes in astrology until I die, because there's so many different rabbit holes that you can go down, but it's fascinating to me. And I just let myself just learn a little bit. And then after a while, I'm like, I'm an astrologer. Like, I actually know this stuff.
You can actually make a chart.
I can do like a whole hour reading on a chart. In fact, that's not enough time to do enough,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know enough astrology that I have to know because I read the Rider-Waite deck. And there are other decks that also have astrology in them. But I use the Rider-Waite deck because it covers everything. Yeah. And I tell people, you'll learn from the Rider-Waite. When you walk out of this class, it doesn't matter what you're drawn to. But if you can read the Rider-Waite deck, you have the support to read any deck.
Yeah. See, you're an expert in tarot. I use tarot to channel. I channel with a tarot deck. And my deck that I use is like the Osho Zen deck that's really non-traditional. Like, it's really clear what the fighting card means or the mind card, you don't have to know tarot to know what that is or this is. Of course, I might have specifics about, and then there's like the Buddha card and the receptivity card. So these are easier to read for someone who does it. I'm not an expert on tarot. I use a non-traditional tarot deck and channel with it.
I was going to say, that's your focus. And I really believe that any tarot deck, go all the way back to the Swiss deck. We're off traffic here for a minute, but we go all the way back to the Swiss deck, which has an all white background, black skeletons, and an occasional red rose. What the heck can you do with that? But that deck is so old, and people swear by it. But it's a focus deck. Like yours is a beautiful focus deck. That's what that is. for me, the Rider-Waite deck, it took 25, 27 years to put it together just in research alone. Tarot is a great way to open up psychically. Aleister Crowley is a great way. And I've had
there's so many more decks now than there was, 27 years ago when I started.
Astrology. Oh, Lord.
There was like a dozen decks to choose from back
covers
then.
so
Now
much.
there's like
It's
and there seems to be new ones that come out all the time, so
I have 2 baskets on the floor over here.
I know. I have a whole bookshelf in my other room that I have a bunch of them. People get me all the time. It's like, okay. But I've been using this since I've been using this Osho Zen deck probably at least 20 years, maybe longer. Initially, I started with the Thoth, and then I used the Mother Peaks, the round ones.
Yeah, I love those. I love those. Ancient
Egyptian one for a while. I'd used the Native American one. I kept changing. And then once I've gotten this deck, when this gets worn out, I buy a new one of the same. Like, I haven't found a deck that works better for me, but also for teaching people who want to learn how to do readings themselves. Like, it's such an easy deck to teach people because you don't have to learn the tarot. I'm teaching people how to channel, which is different than teaching the tarot.
Right.
You do, so I'll have to come take one of your classes on the tarot to learn some new things.
That would be fun. I'm sure you can teach me a lot too. I use this deck primarily because it makes people feel, and it makes people trust. And if you're going to be a psychic, practicing psychic, everybody's psychic. Let me clarify that last statement. I believe everybody is psychic. Depends on what you have that feeling about. I knew I shouldn't have worn this dress today. Or I knew I should have left 10 minutes late, whatever, should or shouldn't have. That's your psychic ability. You know where your kids are when they fibbed and said they were going to John's house and they're really up the hill at Jill's, It's just, we know these things. And it's not just because we know our kids, although that's true too. That's why we wake up in the middle of the night with a feeling. And then we find out the next morning why.
Yeah.
Everybody is psychic. But if you're going to
because I feel like what's rare is telepathy, when people can know what other people are thinking. Like, I can know what people are feeling, but thank goodness I don't know what
we don't need.
But had 2 of my kids had showed telepathy. My oldest, when she was like about 3, that seems to be the age where the best intel comes through, when they're 3 and 4, because they're verbal enough to be able to talk about what they're experiencing, and the world has gotten to them to program them in any way, right? So
we call it starting school, whatever that is. Starting school. Here in the States, it's now preschool, but it used to be first grade.
Yeah. So my oldest,
and they're wide open. That's when they
out of her mouth was what I was thinking, like when she was 3, all the time. But she didn't seem to be like in touch with the fact that she was tapped into me. Like, I never saw like a conscious awareness that she was reading my mind. And it was just kind of weird and creepy that she would start jabbering about what I was just thinking about, right? So she was tapped into me. It was just the 2 of us for a lot of years. None of the rest of my children showed any telepathy. And then my number 6 came along. He started doing the same thing, but he, from the get, was more conscious and present and tuned in than my oldest one had been. So I was like, now is he aware that he's tapped? I wonder. Like, I didn't want to ask him, but there was one day when he was like 3 or 4, 1 week, where every single day he would be out of his mouth what I was thinking. And I was walking with him in a jogging stroller, right? He's in front of me facing forward. I'm behind him. My shoelace comes untied. And I think to myself, I need to stop and tie my shoelace. And he says to me out loud, well, you wouldn't have to stop to tie your shoes if you had no tie shoes like me, because he had like Velcro shoes. And I'm like, okay, nope, he's aware. He's having a conversation with my thoughts.
Yeah. When my youngest son is in his 50s now, a grandfather. That just blows my mind. My son is a grandfather. Blows my mind.
That makes you a great.
When he was a teenager, thank you. When they were teenagers, he was fortunate enough to have a really nice knit group of young men. There were three. We lost the fourth one when they were seniors in high school, and two young ladies that would come and go throughout, but he was really close to that group. And occasionally they'd land, two or three of them at the house, and I'd hear them in the kitchen, and I'd hear somebody say, bottom left drawer. I don't know, let's ask Mom. But I hadn't heard the question. And all of a sudden, one night, I hear this, I told you that would happen. And one of the girls' voices came back, I guess you didn't tell me loud enough. Let me rephrase that. I guess you didn't think it loud enough. And I went to the door and I said, okay, we got to have a talk. So here we are standing in what we call the back kitchen. Literally, them talking to me about they didn't know whether they were hearing or doing what I call picking up.
Yeah.
Somebody's needs. And we never got that conversation settled. But for her to say, I guess you didn't think it out loud enough or loud enough. I'm going, okay. They don't even know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. And they were teenagers, which is right there at that hormonal, which is another time. You were talking about young kids because they're still so attached to the other side. When you start having boys and girls in their hormonal changes, and I'm going to get real blunt here, and that can be right before a girl starts her period or kind of in that first year, and things are so crazy. We know what part of the world that boy does, but that seems to be another super sensitive explosion. I taught school, and if I wanted to know what was going on with the kid but couldn't ask the kid or the parents, I'd ask another kid. And usually in my classroom, or even somebody that had gone to school with them, or they were a grade above or below, I'd just ask on the playground. And one kid said, he was so cute. He was a Fonzie. You know who Fonzie is. He said, I don't know, Miss I. Give me 24 hours. This is a third grader. And he did come up to me on the playground the next day, and he gave me all this information. I said, where'd you get this? He said, I just stood behind her in lunch. I just stood behind her in lunch.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a couple other stories. So my number 5 child out of 6, one time, again, he's about 3, and he says to me, Mommy, I'm so glad I picked you. And I'm like, I'm really glad you picked me too. And then I'm like, why did you pick me? And he said, because you were the only one smiling. And then later he heard me tell that story to someone else. And after I got through telling the story, he goes, yeah, but I had to stay in your line for a really long time.
Oh, how sweet.
5 out of 6. And another neat story, like I started working with essential oils, not for aromatherapy, but to use as cathartic tools to go through deep level stuff. Like I had a friend that would mix up a blend of oils for me, and then I would like get in the tub with them for like 45 minutes and have just these amazing cathartic, sometimes past life kind of experiences with them. So I had taken my number 4 daughter, Genoa, with me, and she was 2. Now she was very, very psychically sensitive and was my only child that wasn't like happy, bubbly. Like she would glare at people like, don't even think of touching me. Like just from a get. She's very psychically sensitive. She could also work out the knots out of my back when she was like 3 kind of thing. When she was 2, I had taken her with me to my friend to get essential oils, and my friend intuitively picked them out, to put together a potion for me. And we first got there, my daughter was like, wasn't happy to be going with me, didn't want, tried to introduce her to my friend. She wasn't having it. And I just ignored her, and we started putting together the oils. And then my daughter started going around and picking up the oils and handing it to me. I said, you want to put that on? And she said, and I'm like, okay. And where do you want it to go? And she would like point here or like whatever. And as she was like applying the oils to herself intuitively, in the space of 10 minutes, went from scowling, had been crying and throwing a tantrum before I brought her into the house, to skipping around the room, hugging both of us. Like, it was such a visual shift in what the emotional body, what the essential oils can do to the emotional body. It was huge, right? So fast forward, she's 4. We've continued to work with oils for her to get her out of her funky moods. She starts coughing. I bring in an oil. I say, here, let's put this on your throat. She was in the bathtub, actually. And I put it on throat. And she's like, Mommy, how come the oils work so well for me? And when she said that, I had a past life flash. And I could see us being in Egypt together and working with oils, and her being my attendant, which made sense because she always wanted to brush my hair. She wanted to give me a massage. She wanted to help me get dressed. And so she had been my attendant in a past life in Egypt. And I said, we've worked with oils before together. Do you remember when we were in Egypt together? And she was quiet for a little bit. And she goes, yeah, that was a really long time ago. So she had tap back, and yeah. Those are some of my favorite kiddo stories of how kids will say the darndest things,
And now I know you have more.
Oh,
I know you have more.
I could talk all day just about my kids. But, I mean, the main thing, for psychic abilities, doing readings and such for others, but to use them in child rearing was, I think, my greatest gift and the best gift I could give to my children, because instead of trying to force them to be what they were supposed to be, I was tuning into who they were, what their gifts and talents are, what they need to pull into their environment. For example, my first 2 daughters were early readers because I read to them a lot. They were reading. Now my oldest son was my number 3 child, was not easy to read. I remember trying to read with him at 5, trying to encourage him to read. And he tossed the book across the floor in the room and said, I suck at this. I'm like, okay, well, let's go cook. I just redirected to the things I knew he was good at, right? And he enjoyed doing. And so it's okay, well, back off of that. And then he started bringing me and then I was plugged into the homeschooling community. So I was a bit concerned because he was, at 5 and not reading, not big a deal. But when it was 6 and 7 and 8 and he still wasn't reading, I started to worry. I'm talking to the other homeschool moms and dads, and they're like, don't worry. It's not important when he learns to read. It's important that he learns to read. We don't have to compare ourselves to what other kids are doing in homeschooling. They get to grow with their own organic pace, right? Just because his 2 older sisters were reading early doesn't mean he's any less smart, right? And he was super smart at other things. He started watching Japanese anime videos where he had to read the English subtitles. And that was something he did it on his own, because my rules were you can't watch TV during the day unless it's PBS. We didn't have cable, so it's got to be educational. If you're going to turn the TV on, if you're going to get on the computer, once we got a computer, it has to be educational. You can play educational games, but that's it up until a certain time. That was my boundaries. Other than that, they got to really choose what they were doing. And I came up parties watching videos. I'm like, you're watching videos? He goes, yeah, but I have to read it. It's in Japanese. I have to read the English subtitles. I'm like, okay, so all right, I'll take it. And that's how he picked up his reading pace and was learning to read. But if I had put him into school, he's homeschooled up until his freshman year in high school. If I'd put him in at age 7, 8, and he wasn't reading yet, he would have been labeled and, put in a box or whatever.
Yeah.
I let him develop at his own pace, which was slower than the girls. And, long story short, he homeschooled up to his freshman year in high school, and he thought he'd be behind everybody else because I hadn't taught him anything. I hadn't shoved curriculum down their throat. I'd been an unschooler. We'd done lots of go out and explore the world and learn things firsthand. And we were part of a Friday homeschooling co-op for 14 years, which was magical. They learned all kinds of things from woodworking to unit studies on a country to I taught a psychic development class for teenagers. I taught music for the little guys. It was just parents would bring their gifts in and everybody collaborated. It was just a beautiful experience. But so when he started school, he thought he'd be behind. And instead, he found out he made straight A's for his freshman year for all 8 classes and got 100 average for the year in 4 of those 8 classes and graduated valedictorian. So the child that wasn't reading until age 9 let to develop at his own pace in his own way, ended up valedictorian. And then, majoring in physics and astronomy at UT, getting a full ride scholarship. So, yeah. And that was
about college yet?
Huh?
Is he graduated college yet?
Oh, yeah. He graduated. He's been graduated for years now. So, yeah. Did high school, then did college. And yeah, I think he graduated from high school in 2012. And then college was 4 years later. I think maybe he took an extra semester, 4.5 years to finish his degrees. And, but yeah. And, that
folks, listen to what she just said. You were listening to a large family, the mother of a large family, doing it pretty much on her own, her way, practicing psychic. She didn't just pop up out of a rosebud psychic. She had to learn. She had to be rooted, pardon the expression, and she had to be brave. Now, this is a walking, talking practitioner, human being. She's a good example of why I created this podcast. I wanted people to see us as humans, not as robots or weird energies coming from God only knows where, or Buddha only knows where, whatever. And I say that not sarcastically, because she has referred to her belief system several times as Buddhist, practicing Buddhist. Lady that I talked to earlier today, she comes from a Catholic background. I talked to a gentleman the other day that grew up Jewish. We are all humans. We have our challenges. We have our challenges to become what we are. Karen and I haven't talked about that a lot yet. We will. But she is a walking, talking, independent female, yes, who have had men in her life. Her relationships, some have been great, some have been not so good, but haven't we all? But it has made her become a stronger spirit and a good human body to be in. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Your spirit will have learned and taught a lot.
Yeah, because I trust my intuition, and I trusted my intuition when it came to raising my children and what I felt was best for them, and not trying to make them be what I wanted, but listening to my own gut, my own intuition with each child, that each child was different, So, my first child went into public kindergarten and then came out and homeschooled first through fourth, went in public fifth, sixth. After sixth, took her out. Then she went into magnet junior high and high school. She's got a college degree. My next two homeschooled up to their freshman year in high school. My older daughter, Samantha, went to the performing arts high school and is now an actress living in LA. And then Malachi, we chose Travis High School for him because he thought he wanted to be a chef. And so they had a culinary program. And, he realized he was so smart that he could have the different options, And then Janelle is the next one, and she did self-taught high school, and she's been traveling to like probably 8 different states since she's graduated. I don't ever know where she is. She's gone from Alaska to Hawaii to Florida to Arizona to Kansas to Utah. Like she's just bouncing around, being the gypsy. And then my number 5 went to Magnet Junior High, Magnet High School, graduated from Southwestern and Georgetown. And then my youngest homeschooled all the way through. He's the only one that we actually gave a homeschool diploma to because he thought school would cut into his practice time. He started doing professional music at age 9 and has played in 5 different bands, 3 of them currently, playing drums in one, guitar in another, and bass in a third. So,
which you have not talked about much in this. You are a professional musician in your own right.
I am.
So if you call her home, you will get a serenade.
True that. Yeah, my mom's a piano teacher, so I was a musician from the womb. So I can't remember a time that I wasn't playing on black and white keys. And then I picked up the flute at age 11 and the guitar in college. I sang my first solo in church. I did grow up Episcopal before I started practicing Buddhism. I was I was a practicing Christian, and I sang my first solo in church when I was 12. So music has always been a part of my life. I've had a music duo with an ex, and currently I'm in a three-piece band with other women my age. We call ourselves the Texas Crones.
Who's in that group?
My best friend, Lisa Lavender, who's got my exact same birthday. I'm 45 minutes older. And since I was born in Germany, she was born in Fort Worth. Our risings are different, but our charts look like the same chart twisted, in different houses and stuff. She's got different rising, but we've been besties for over 40 years. And then another friend that lives in Wimberley, or between Wimberley and Blanco. And she came to me for a reading. The other woman did, and
I have not met Lavender, but I know who she is.
Yeah,
I know that's Australia.
Florida for a week to be with her. So we're gonna be doing some music in Florida while we're there. So yeah, and I've done some solo gigs, and I just did some music at a Buddhist meeting recently. So yeah, and back to Buddhism, for me, when I first started practicing Buddhism 40 years ago, it gave me a spiritual practice. It was suggested that you chant every morning and every evening. And as I started doing that regularly, that's when my psychic abilities really took off and I started being louder within. And, so I really see that doing the spiritual practice was where my work came out of. It couldn't have happened, I don't think, if I hadn't started doing that regularly. And I have to meditate or chant every day in order to do my work, because I want to stay grounded in the connection to the divine. Otherwise, I feel like we get pulled into our ego, and it's a whole different thing. But I haven't done a psychic in over 20 years, though. I haven't been a part of the larger community for a hot minute.
What you just said is really important, because I don't think the general public, certainly cannot speak for all of them, but I know so many of the general public, they do not realize that we are part of our belief system of choice. And I think they're surprised when they realize that we have, for lack of a better word, religion. I like to call it a belief system, or non-denominational, but a belief. I think the public is often surprised. Oh, you go to church 3 times a week or whatever. Right. I have to tell you this story because it's funny to me. It's just funny. Years and years and years ago, when Latrell Maples had the fairs, she was invited by what was then a new country club in Bastrop, Texas, in Tahitian Village. I don't even know if it's still functioning or not, but they had a really nice gift shop, and it was brand new. And what do they call it? A lobby area, and space enough for about 8 or 9 psychics and some vending tables. Well, she played golf with one of the ladies that worked there, and the lady said, "Oh, why don't you bring some people out? It'd be fun. It'd be different." It was a one-day fair on a Sunday. And we weren't crazy busy, but we were pretty steady through the day. People were having fun, and it was lighthearted, and it was a fairly close-knit group. Everybody knew everybody, vendors and all, and it was a small area for people to walk around. Well, right about 4:30, we were going to close at 6. These 3 guys came up to the door. Now, there's glass everywhere, so we could see out. Everybody could see it. They stand at the door talking Latrell. They all have jeans on that will stand up by themselves, boots, belts, buckles, nice shirts, all in their late 30s, early 40s, maybe mid 40s, and short haircut. Well, immediately, the row that I was sitting on, we started making bets what religion they were. But they were being nice. And she said they spread out. It was like they'd planned it. One went to one corner, one went to another corner, and another one started looking around the vendor stuff. Mostly the crystals. We all knew what they were looking for. No voodoo. I'm being silly, but you understand. And there was I don't know if you knew Raven or not. She was a champion bodybuilder, champion wrestler, long before it was cool for women to do that. But The way she dressed, you'd never know it. She was a slight woman. If you pulled a size off the rack, it would probably be around a 9 or a 10. But if you saw her without her blouse on, which she always wore a buffy blouse, you couldn't tell it was muscular. I happened to see her without because I'd seen her in a bathing suit, so I knew what she looked like. And I don't think too many people would want to approach her with bad intention. Let's just say that. And she was sitting next to me, and a pretty girl. Raven was her real name, but her hair happened to be blue-black, and she had big brown eyes and just a very, very pretty woman doing tarot cards. And we were laughing and cutting up. We were watching these guys mill around, sit down. I saw one of them pay for a reading. I was kind of surprised, but he walked out. He was real serious. Well, the one that sat down at her table, they chit-chatted for a few minutes. I could hear most of everything that was said because we were so close. And I finally saw him lean in very seriously, and he looked at her deep in the eyes, and he said, "Do you believe in Jesus?" And she said, "No." You know, you got that reaction. And then she put her cards down very calmly, and she leaned over in kind of a provocative way. And she said, "Because I'm Jewish." And his face fell from here to here. And it was all I had to literally turn my face just to keep from smiling. And he finally just leaned back and just roared. And he said, "So you're the head of the household?" And she said, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
And they started talking about the Bible and how it related to the Torah scrolls. And she didn't drop. They could have sat there all night long talking, and she would have had something. Most people do not realize that we have those backgrounds. I'd say over 90% of us. My grandfather was a Baptist preacher. So, but he also had scholarly books everywhere in the house.
There reminds me of one of the past life regressions I facilitated that have stood out the most was with a client who had come to me a lot for readings. It was his first past life regression. He was a gay man, spiritual but not religious. And he went into 2 different lifetimes. The first lifetime was like old Chicago, gangster wannabe, kind of like trying to hang on the periphery of a mob. And, it was interesting. I was kind of chuckling as he was describing the different scenes, right? Then he flashes into, we're going into another lifetime. And I usually ask people to look at their feet and describe their shoes or, to ground in. And he said, "I have on like rope sandals." And he goes, I said, "What are you wearing?" He goes, "Well, I think I'm a shepherd. I have really loose clothes on." I said, "Okay, well, can you see yourself there with a flock of animals?" And he was quiet for a while. He goes, I don't see a flock." I'm like, "Okay, well, just go with what you are seeing." And he described he was walking into a village. And I said, "Okay, does this feel like your home village?" And he said, "No." I said, "Is anybody looking at you?" And he's like, "No, they're just describing, women walking around with baskets on their head and children running around playing and whatever." And then the next scene, he's sitting down with a family eating. I said, "Is this this is your family? Is this someone you know?" He goes, "No, I don't know that." And then he goes, "I think I'm holy." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." He goes, I'm traveling with Jesus, and I'm trying to get people to come out and listen to him speak. And I'm eating dinner with these people and inviting them to come hear Jesus speak." And I'm like, "Okay, can you see yourself there with Jesus?" And he said, he's quiet for a minute. He goes, "Yeah, wow, he's a lot bigger than I thought he would be." And he's like describing Jesus. And as he's describing, like, talk about the goosies, like everywhere. The room just filled with this energy. And I had goosies running from the head to the toe, and really felt like he was describing this encounter with Jesus. He had been one of his disciples or some sort of advocate for him. We didn't discern like who he was, but it was such a profound experience for me, just sitting there facilitating it, that I was like, yeah, obviously, if Jesus is going to show up in a past life regression with someone, like, this is cool with him, because his energy definitely filled the room. He, relayed the conversation that he was having or what he was, teaching about. It was just very, very powerful. One of those that really stands out in my memory of past life regression.
For me, I know they talk about the people at the Last Supper, and you have a picture, and you have John the Baptist, and you have not necessarily that, but the ones that are named in the Bible. But for me, I've always known there were so many more. Mm-hmm. Call them hanger-oners or people outside the circle, but maybe they followed and camped someplace else, but followed him.
Yeah.
Or followed one of his
flock.
Yeah, like a flock. Right. Mm-hmm. And yet we don't hear those names because they either got forgotten or they didn't get written about. But right. I've always known that there were way many more than were ever mentioned. And I don't know why I know that. And I know it was made up of men and women, not just men were allowed, but men and women. And of course, in those days, women were more of I don't like the word servitude but they were lesser known. Important, but still less
valued, like very much valued in the time, like especially around Jesus. Like he didn't have this women were lesser, men are better kind of a thing. There wasn't a patriarchal thing for Jesus. He was definitely seeing the divine in everyone. I mean, that's what I took as his message as a Christian, that Jesus said, love one another. That's the main message, like really. And what I have, you have, kind of thing. I'm no different. We all have the ability to connect with the divine.
Too bad we can't say that loud and clear these days and be heard.
So much that divides us. People are looking for what divides and separates instead of what unites, for sure.
Yeah.
And even like I saw a comedian do this bit about, he was a Black comedian, and that did this bit about probably in a past life, he was the master kind of thing. And I don't remember all it recalled, but it was just this concept of you just never know until you do know. People like, well, why would you want to see your past lives? Does it make a difference? Like, sometimes it really does. It really fills in the gap of why you have certain karmic patterns that you repeat over and over and over again. A lot of that is karma, i.e. attached to past life causes, or why is someone so fortunate in this lifetime, and, or why are they born in such negative circumstances? A child is so innocent, but you look at the whole graph of the soul's growth and journey, and it gives you a different perspective and different picture. And even with my children, when I took my first child so personally, it was like I was influencing everything. And then my second child came out like I even wrote a song about her called Buddha Child. Like her presence filled the room when she was born. She was my first home birth. I had my first child natural in the hospital, and the other 5 were all born at home. Again, an intuitive decision based on inner guidance. And she came out like the Buddha. She was just present. She didn't cry. Her spirit, this tiny little thing in her spirit, just filled the room when she was born. I'm like, okay, hello, So and then I realized, okay, they're bringing their own bag of tricks, and you can see who they are from the get go, right? It's yes, there's a lot of influences of our environment that also play into who we become, but we bring a lot of it with us from the get.
I keep going back to your son that said he had to wait a long time in line, and that's waiting for a spirit, really, to raise him. In my observation, so did he wait while other people came through the spirit of you?
Well, apparently, because he was waiting while other people were coming first, because he had I had to wait in your line for a really long time. So,
yeah.
But it confirmed where I had always felt like we choose our parents.
Yeah.
And for him to say, I'm so glad I chose you, also confirmed for me, like, oh yeah, I had that kind of hypothesis that we pick our parents rather than it being sort of hapless. And, and I've seen it with past life regressions too. People will not just go into past lives, they'll go into in between lifetimes, they'll go into concurrent dimensions, they'll go into other planets. Sometimes they'll go into what seems like maybe a future life, like it's called past life regressions. Once you go in the portal, there's all kinds of places that, beyond our logical, rational human mind, and when people say, well, you only have one life, make the best of this one. Yes. Yeah. Do what you can to stay present right here and now. This one is the one that's important. But, it makes so much sense sometimes when you learn about your past lives, for sure.
I like that waiting in line thing. I do. I love it.
It was quite the compliment.
It is.
Yeah. And I did also look, even though there were definitely the fathers that came and went, and I was mostly a single parent for most of it. Yeah. And, even pulled that off, listening to my intuition and how to manifest being home with my children and doing work that I love part-time while I spent my majority of my energy raising children and homeschooling them. So it's only been for years that I've really been alone, like since the last two moved out.
So are you empty nested now?
I'm empty nested.
And your youngest is there?
No, my youngest two moved out together. Last September was 2 years ago. And so they moved out together and got an apartment together for 2 years. And then in September, when their lease was up for the second time, they now split. And my youngest, who's the professional musician, is in a house with 4 other musicians. And then my number 5 is in a house in Bastrop, like you were talking, with 3 other roommates. And they're a bunch of tech nerds like he is. So they found their tribes that they're living in different houses. And my oldest son lives in an apartment with 2 roommates that he'd been living with forever, one of which is a fellow valedictorian that he met his freshman year at UT. And they've been roommates since their sophomore year. And since they've stayed together. So they do also nerdy things. They're like little science math nerds. And,
your ability to nest as a spirit and to create, like you said, jokingly, a tribe, but you taught them some wonderful, and they gave you wonderful support as a family unit.
Oh, yeah.
That we call here on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Not everybody gets that.
Yeah, that's true.
And
I run into so many women, in particular clients, that are in their early 40s or mid 40s or late 40s or whatever, and just always assumed they would have children but they never met Mr. Right. And so therefore didn't start a family and whatever, and I met several Mr. Wrongs. And my families. I had 1 child with my first husband and 4 children with my second husband. And then I got my bonus child, because when you have 5, you get 1 for free. I don't know if you knew that or not. And, I was with his dad one time, and that my little bonus child. But psychically, I knew the moment I conceived him, and I had not had that experience. I talk to women who know the moment they've conceived. I didn't know that with my other ones, but with my last one, I knew the moment I conceived him, and I could feel his little soul, almost like a little smiley face emoji head, like turn and just beam a grin at me. I'm like, oh no. Not
another one.
I was already a single mom of 5 when he came along, but he's been such a blessing. I can't imagine my life without him. But yeah, that was something out. And that's one thing, I guess, maybe because I've had 6, I'm really good at picking up for people is when little souls are hanging out, waiting to be conceived around clients. I've predicted clients' babies being pregnant again and again and again. And I feel them almost like little entities kind of hanging around their shoulders. I can just feel it. Again, I don't see it visually, but I can just, I'm like, oh, you got a couple souls here. I could feel it. I can feel them hanging out. And they don't always manifest. I had a client that I told her that, and she went and set up an appointment for her husband to have a vasectomy that next week because she didn't want them coming through. I said, they can wait, come around as grandchildren later. It's not a doubt.
Those little souls were waiting in line,
they
just
were
like
really
yours did.
smart. Exactly. She was saying, nope, the bridge is out.
The world has learned a lot about you. You're doing exactly what I wanted this podcast to be, and that's introducing what it's like to be a psychic or whatever we get into and
Right.
still function on planet Earth. I call it humanizing us. You'll have your own library that you can add to books. Yeah. Well, books and whatever else is out there. I always forget the jargon. YouTube that you want to refer, people you
okay,
want to
yeah.
refer, anything that will teach the public. And
Okay.
you can
So
share
I do have a
information about the
website.
public.
I have a website. It's psyched-up-movement.com, or you can Google Karen Marie Psychic and it'll take you there. KarenMarie. I have a Facebook personal page and a Psyched Up. That's the name of my business, Psyched Up Facebook page. I also have an Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. They're all Karen Marie Psychic. And I post a daily video every day. It's about a 1-minute video where I'll talk about whatever transits are big for that day. Like today, Mercury retrograde is headed towards an opposition with Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, which is magnifying the Mercury retrograde energy. We've encountered some Mercury retrograde energy before we connected today. Glitching around computers and stuff is one of the ways that can show up. So I talk about the transits for the day, and I draw a tarot card and I videotape it and I post it on all my platforms. So you can tap into those just for a daily little dose of what's going on in the skies. And then, of course, you could contact me if you want a reading or a rebirthing or a past life regression, or if you want to work on developing your own abilities, all that. All my
Thank you for today. And I think that's important.
my
But when I say library, you can add to your list of books that you're referring, music, meditations, anything that you think might help someone gather their confidence, grow, anything. And I don't care how old they are or how new they are. And you can add to them continually. You can heal your life. Oh, yeah.
This is the #1 book that I recommend. Now, this is a 20-year anniversary copy, which is like dog-eared. But one of the coolest things it has in the back is a list of illnesses, diseases, and their probable cause, and a new thought pattern. For example, I just opened it to this, the throat, right? It's an avenue of creative expression. It's a creativity channel. You can affirm, I open my heart and sing the joys of love. If you have throat problems, it's the inability to speak up for oneself, swallowed anger, stifled creativity, or a refusal to change. And the affirmation that you say, it's okay to make noise. I express myself freely and joyously. I speak up for myself with ease. I express my creativity. I am willing to change. And usually one of those things will resonate or pick up. And of course, you can start looking through all your different things. There's like, cancer, and there's you have cancer in what part of your body, and you can look up those kind of things. Cancer is usually without long-held resentment. And then whatever area it shows up in, there's, you can track it down. So this is like one of the biggest tools I use with others, and the #1 book I would recommend for people to read.
I love that book.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
She
But
talks
you will.
Louise Hay, who has Hay House Publishers, and like Wayne Dyer and a lot of spiritual guru types publish on her at her publishing house now. She passed away a couple of years ago, but I call her the grandmother of metaphysics. This work was just phenomenally instrumental of like opening up people's minds of that what you say, what you do creates your reality, and negatively held thoughts and feelings and emotions can create dis-ease in your body.
Oh, absolutely. I used to carry around the pamphlet size book of just the physical and mental ailments. I carried that around in my purse to psychic fairs all the time. If I was out publicly reading, I had that little thing stuck away, that little book stuck away.
Yeah, and just that heal your body. Yeah, you can get just it's just heal your body, just the symptoms and such. And then Jan Spiller is one of my favorite astrologers. Molly McCord. I watch if I don't have time to watch any other YouTube videos in a week, I will catch Molly McCord's, because she gives a video on Wednesday where she talks about the transits for the upcoming week. On Monday, she has a topic. And she also has lots of books out on astrology. She is phenomenal. Molly McCord. Pam, what's her name? Pam Gregory is an astrologer out of the UK. She also is super, super fab. Trust in your own intuition when you hear someone speaking, whether they feel like that feels like truth or that feels like BS. Like, so many of the times when Molly's talking, I will have just gotten that download. I think our guides are like on the same team, or they're cousins or something. Like, so many times I'm like, that's just what I got. It's like, it's that confirmation. Like, we work in a similar, she's an intuitive astrologer, which is what I do as well. I mean, I have the logical knowledge of astrology, but I definitely use the channeling with the astrology, Yeah.
This has been too fun to hang up. We've been on for almost 2 hours, and I cannot thank you enough. It's been fun. We barely scratched the surface, folks, with this lady's talents, and maybe we can talk her into coming back and doing some teaching occasionally.
I'm happy to do that.
Or come back and talk about what's really coming up in the year. Hit a highlight.
Astrology. Yeah. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to fun stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. And I just encourage everyone to listen to your own intuition when it comes to developing your own abilities. Like, your own higher self, your own guidance team will guide you. You can just have that seeking spirit and have that desire to learn and trust how you feel guided on a daily basis. The thing I say most to clients is, what today do you feel guided to do? And you have to get quiet and still enough to listen. But if you do that every day and follow the direction, that's what can get you on your path and move.
That's good advice to leave right now. So we'll say thank you. I'll say thank you. And please come back again. And thank you for being so gracious and sharing what I know is really valuable time for you. I appreciate it. Thank you for being part of our podcast. We'll see you soon.
Right.
Bye, soul sister.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning into The Conversations with the Ancients, where we take you on a journey where you'll hear voices of metaphysicians from the past, as well as today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Remember to visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Conversations with the Ancients.